share that with you if you want to. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wayne Hiller van Rensburg. I'm the Executive Officer of the Institute of Retirement Funds Africa, and we're very happy to launch our first short IRFA ESG session, and we'll tell you more about our guest. To start off with, what we wanted to share with you is that this forms as a part of a series of webinars that we're putting together to help trustees and other decision makers in the retirement sector better understand ESG principles. In today's webinar, we'll be discussing ESG ratings and their implications for investors. Focusing on the existing ESG ratings, investors can reposition their investment portfolios to benefit from the positive ESG momentum and potentially help improve companies' performance through the adoption of ESG principles. The session will further explore some momentum in the ESG space, how positive shifts in sector ESG practices could transform into sector and market adjustments at a portfolio level, and how general improvement and integration of measurements could improve the integrity of ESG ratings. Zukiswa Ngema, who you'll see on the screen there if you have allow for multiple speakers, Zukiswa Ngema from Mahlako will be presenting on this today. Zukiswa joined Mahlako from the Public Investment Corporation, where she started out as an ESG graduate and was soon promoted to ESG analyst. She is a dynamic and experienced ESG consultant with a passion for impact investing and is experienced in post-investment monitoring and ESG performance assessment. She belongs to the Economic Society of South Africa and the International Association for Impact Assessment South Africa. And just a bit about Mahlako. Mahlako is an African woman-owned advisory and alternative investment management firm focused on the delivery of implementable and effective socioeconomic development assets and solutions that deliver sustainable impact and superior risk-adjusted returns over the long term. The firm has a deep investment and advisory expertise built through demonstrable project development, deal origination, and execution track record since inception in 2008. So it's been a while. So thank you, and I'm going to hand over to Zukiswa now. Just before we do that, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat box for now. And at the end of the session, we'll provide an opportunity for people to ask questions. There, please raise your hand and we'll allow you to speak. Thank you, and over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Wayne, for the introduction. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It's lovely to see you today. So there's been an increased attention given to environmental, social, and governance ratings by investors and stakeholders. This has further intensified by the recent economic instability, social injustice, public health issues, and issues and crises experienced globally in the most recent years. So the attention is now on, what is ESG? What is, when we're talking about ESG ratings, what are we talking about? So before I begin, I'll start by first defining some of these concepts just for our information purposes, and then we can move on to the greater body. So you're welcome to just type in any questions that you might have in the chat box, and then we'll engage at the end of the session. So ESG, simply put, this basically describes a set of components used to assess and measure the non-financial risk, impacts, and opportunities of companies. The components would range from environmental matters that would take into account energy use, waste, pollution, etc., and matters of that. And then when you're looking at the social pillar, we'll genuinely looking at issues such as, working conditions of employees, community and stakeholder engagements. And in terms of the governance pillar, we're looking at basically diversity on the board, etc., etc. And then when we move on to now what is sustainable investing, this is also known as ESG investing and socially responsible investing. It is also an investment approach in which investors consider a company's ESG profile and performance alongside its financial status when making an investment decision. So this approach mainly is centered on the risk related to ESG factors and leads to the implementation of mitigating measures in the investment process. The other concept that we'll also explore is impact investing. So this is just a subset or another variant of ESG-based investing. And this one basically is a deliberate positive approach, well, a deliberate a deliberate approach in which investors try to have a positive impact on communities and societies, as well as the environment at large. And these funds make a proactive, measurable, and lasting contribution to communities. So in terms of this, the approach includes, the results of this would include jobs created, community-based projects, and we can also add power added to the grid, for example, etc. in the case of Mahlako, which is one of the key elements that we try to achieve in our fund. So in terms of this, we pursue a measurable and a direct impact on the society and the environment. It is also important to note that with these assets, they must be also financially or commercially viable. And what we have seen is that fund managers are now aligning their investment objectives against sustainable development goals, the national development goals, and we've aligned our goals as Mahlako to the sustainable development goals. And we've outlined specifically what our targets, what we want to achieve, what our objectives are, which is trying to ensure that we add electricity back to the grid. We're creating jobs, creating transformation within our portfolio investments. So I won't go into greater detail about impact investing, but it is a very interesting topic and one of my favorite topics. Then we also move on to the concept of ESG ratings. So now, the other question to ask yourself is, what is ESG ratings? And here it is when we use a set of measures, both qualitative and quantitative, to score a company in terms of ESG risk. And the risk can be established for each company by scoring them on an individual elements for the E, S, and the G. To improve the objectivity of the scorecard, sometimes investors would hire a third-party service provider to do the ESG analysis, or companies can also hire an independent ESG analyst, or in my case, to do the analysis for the fund or the investors. And the assessment is done across various industries and can be determined by weighting the E, S, and the G elements based on the sector and industry characteristics, and identifying the materiality of ESG factors affecting different sectors. So an example of this is that when you are emphasis or the social element would weigh more, and when you're looking at the banking sector, the governance element would weigh more. And that's basically what in terms of this, in terms of the various ESG ratings, both internationally and locally. Internationally, would look at the NCI, the Robesco, SEM, etc. And there's various other DFI ratings that are available. The various companies can use. In terms of our ratings at Mahlako, we are aligned to the IFC performance standards, and that's where we rate our companies against. The advantages of ESG ratings is that they are a useful benchmarking tool, right? They can be used for decision making. They can be used to enhance the sustainability of the company. And in terms of this, the scores are intended to assist investors recognize major ESG risk in a company. And these scores can be used by investors to evaluate the overall ESG performance by companies, and companies that perform well in ESG are thought to have better risk management tools and can better capture and forecast opportunities. And an ESG rating is believed to help investors capture the unquantifiable environmental and social governance topics when making investment decisions. So this is a very great tool when you when you use an ESG rating tool. It helps investors to make a decision as part of the greater investment process. When we're sitting with our fund principals and the investment professionals, and they're making the decision based on financial, soundness of the portfolio company. I then come in and I'm like, okay, based on the rating I've done, we can then evaluate a company holistically. But it's not to say that ESG ratings are, overall perfect. There are shortcomings to the ratings. As can be expected, the different fund managers can have different results and level of biasness as well. And ESG ratings are almost always assessed using publicly available information, etc. So this is can be quite challenging when companies don't really address or explicitly address sustainable issues in their reporting. And the inverse is also true in that companies that report more on ESG tend to score higher than those that don't report. So the rating penalizes companies that don't disclose. So there are lots of ESG risks also that cannot be measured, which is also a challenge. And then there's a lack of consistency between rating providers. There's differences in matrix and methods, which means that markets are less likely to correct prices, are less likely to correct the price of companies on ESG performance. So the accuracy of an ESG score is very reliant on the input data, and therefore ESG scores are only useful when input data is unbiased and robust. So, and also the other issue is that some ESG factors might not be, easily measurable and, easily captured. So when we're looking at this, and some of the recommendations that we have is that, transparency in how ESG scores is quite essential. So an investor should always be able to take a deep dive into the scoring methodology and easily understand the decision-making process of that, and should easily understand that the ESG, the decision-making process. It's important for investors to consider all different factors to assess potential risk and shortfalls and make an informed investment decision on the overall ESG assessment. Investors should monitor companies and assess if they're transparent in disclosing ESG strategies. And also it is also important that companies show how the strategy aligns to the specific financial and ESG goals in this regard. And a lot of research needs to be done by investors in order to further break down the E, S, and the G to get more useful information around those topics, around those elements. And emphasis, reliance should not be put solely on the ratings, but an additional insight should be provided by research. And some of the practical examples would be to have engagements, risk assessment, corporate engagements with your portfolio companies, risk assessment, and a deep dive. And also it's also nice to have a detailed, ESG analysis on your portfolio companies during your ESG due diligence phase. And amongst this, we focus on ESG investing. Amongst this, you would focus on the environmental factors, the social factors, and the governance factors around how decisions are made within the portfolio companies. What I've observed as well is that fund managers in the unlisted space have greater influence on ESG practices. And how you do this is you build a relation, the relationship that you build with the management team is also very key. And also, the various shareholders as well. And in terms of this, it is also important that funds, have clear objectives about what they want to achieve, in terms of ESG, and also have, continuous reporting on the impact that they're trying to achieve as a result of their fund. And at Mahlako, we have continuous engagement with our portfolio companies. We have a standard practice of visiting our portfolios at least once a year and engaging in between at least once a year, but also on a quarterly basis. We engage with our portfolio companies to assess exactly, how they're performing in terms of the E, S, and the G. And so these are some of the practical things that fund managers can do in order to be more more engaging, more active participant, more active in terms of it is quite, an interesting journey to observe that, with the unlisted space, you have that greater power to do so. So in terms of that, also the other thing is, portfolio companies can hire an additional resources, just like how Mahlako has hired me to provide a more detailed research on ESG at the portfolio levels, and ensuring that monitoring on ESG aspects is done on a continuous basis. And fund managers and also can also build their own ESG systems that guide and integrate ESG into the whole investment process, and not just say that the of the whole investment process, and also outlining exactly what are the different matrices to use. So when you're looking at the E and the E, S, and the G, outlining exactly what we are, what is core to the fund. In terms of the E, you can look at the working conditions, the working conditions of the employees, the transformation factors, etc. When you're looking at environmental, we're looking at resource efficiency issues, we're looking at water use, we're looking at carbon emissions, etc. So these are the practical steps that fund managers can do to be more active to be investment process. So in that, I will then maybe go to our Q&A if there's anyone that has more questions on this, and then yes, we can discuss if anyone has more questions, if anyone has questions. So let me just check.
Zuki, there are two observations, and I don't know if we want to invite the Anne Cabot-Allertauser if she wants to talk. And then we can also invite, I see there's Mandla Nkosi also has a question. I don't know if you can see the questions on the Q&A, whether you want me to read them out and then, the observations, and then maybe you can respond from there.
Yes, please, can you read them out?
Okay, so Mandla, we recognize you. I'll get to you now. The question, the two observations, questions posed by Anne Cabot-Alethauser. ESG ratings are typically ex post, historical, often with a long lag because it's generally reported annually. They may be useful to asset managers who may want to determine on whether there is something that they should be paying attention to that they overlooked. But what asset owners should not do is ask their asset managers to give them their ESG scores to evaluate whether their asset managers have done a good job of integrating ESG considerations. Full stop. There's another one, but maybe it's quite a lot already. And it's a good question, I think.
Mm-hmm. So from here, I'm not quite sure what is the question.
So I think maybe the observation being, ESG is not going to be the answer to everything. That's what I'm reading here. ESG is one of the important measures that you can use, but it's not the, you shouldn't mandate your investment service provider to look at everything from ESG. I think that what the message is. It's not the silver bullet that's going to solve all our problems. And I think lots of what you said is true. So yeah, I'm just going to stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's that's true, Wayne. In terms of what we're trying to say is that in terms of ESG, they are not perfect. They are a great tool that you can use to sort of complement your decision making within the investment process. But at the end of the day, asset owners and fund managers need to play a more active role in ensuring that, the ESG evaluation and assessment is done. And, more practical example is through the engagements, interacting, with the portfolio companies, just trying to assess exactly, against what are the key ES and the G elements that you're trying to evaluate and trying to understand the performance of that company. And also something that I've also noted is oftentimes portfolio companies or companies advertise as, one element that they perform in, such as the environmental aspect, but they don't really report on the S and the G. And it is up to, the fund owners to also just engage and better understand the performance of the companies on, in line with those pillars. Wayne, we can then move on to Anne's second comment.
So she basically said what you just said. Yeah, we should have read the two of them together.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes. So that strategy didn't work. That strategy didn't work. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. So I think Mandla, your opportunity. I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk now, and we'll obviously record Anne's observations and questions. So I think it's a good, thing to add to what we're doing here. Over to you, Mandla.
Morning. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, we can.
I was just involved in an exercise conducted by Sanlam. It was more of a survey where they were dealing with the issue and implications of ESG versus the notion and practice in as far as impact investing is concerned. What that exercise actually did, it sort of like showed me how investing in general will be dealt with going forward. Now, instead of keeping these elements separate, they've included them, saying that ESG has to have an impact element in it for it to be successful. For example, to make sure that your combinations in terms of investing and asset allocation is actually correct for that intention. So in this kind of a presentation, what can you tell us in terms of how we should then view investing going forward, taking those two elements as one, or bridging the gap between ESG on its own and impact investment, as it were?
Okay. Awesome.
I thought it was me having internet problems here. I see Zuki has gone off. We're nearly at the end here, and we welcome more observations, more comments, because it's obviously going to allow us to craft our future engagements on this. The idea of today's session was really to just start to start the conversation and get people going. Zuki, are you back? Maybe if you're having difficulty,
yes,
you
I
can
am.
leave your camera off or something like
Yes,
that.
apologies for that.
No problem.
Okay. Apologies for that. I just experienced connection issues. But I was going to as a comment investing. We have laid down exactly at the get-go, you need to understand what are, you want to achieve. So be ensuring that you add a certain amount of, you are ensuring that this, in terms of job creation, have you also have of skill, etc. And these are the key objectives of the fund and what you're trying to achieve. And when we do receive a potential investment, that's what we look at to say, at the end of the investment, what the basic, to speak, at the end, but from the beginning in terms of monitoring it over the life of the fund and ensuring that are they objectives that we've set out to be set out, and also ensuring that you engage and ensure that you also understand what are the challenges of to report to say over the life of the fund, this is how many jobs created. This is how much energy we put to the project, So in terms of it emerging impact of the, from the beginning of your investment to the end of your investment, it must not afterwards to say these are some of the considerations that you need to take into account. We also engage with our portfolio. Which contractors are you sourcing? Are they Black companies? Are they within the local government? So these are the elements that you constantly engage in your portfolio companies on to ensure that when we're saying to the word impact. And it's also just creating an impact to the communities. I will answer your question, Mandla.
But that a good response, and maybe we can write a short note.
Okay.
And
not sure if
share
he's still there. Okay.
Great. And I see Anne has one more question. Shall we give, well, one more? Anne wants to share with us, and maybe we'll have Anne talk, and then we'll go from there. And I think we'll finish off there and work on our future discussion points. Thank you. Over to you, Anne. I don't know if you just had your hand up for another reason.
Here, have I unmuted now?
You have. Thank you.
Okay, so what I think Zukiswa said, which I thought was very good, that very first slide that she showed is she showed a kind of an evolution from ESG.
Sorry, Wayne, I'm back.
So back to your first slide there, that one right there, Zukiswa. I think what you're trying to say is exactly what Mahlako heard when he heard the Sanlam thing, that we can't just sit here at just looking at whether or not we've taken account of ESG. That if you really want something to come out of this ESG investigation, we need to kind of evolve our thinking. And the next step of the evolution is in sustainable investing. In other words, to what extent does that ESG, create a sustainable opportunity or impede a sustainable opportunity for the specific company? But the real exciting part is whether or not you can use these sort of assessments at company levels to create systems change. And that's what Sanlam was trying to explain to Manla. And that's where the challenge comes. But to get to that point, we need to change absolutely everything in terms of how we benchmark performance, in terms of how we do the reporting. And that was the point I was trying to make, that you're actually requiring that there's a whole cultural change that takes place in the industry. So if asset owners just look at people's ESG scorecards, they're going to completely miss the dynamics of whether or not there's any change occurring, or whether or not even looking at ESG has resulted in any sort of improvement in the outcomes for these companies in terms of the ESG requirements for South Africa. So I think Zukiswa has got all the right elements in her presentation, but I think you have to think of this as an evolving piece of work that we're looking at here. We're only just beginning to recognize, and if you look at the latest UNPRI reports on the legal frameworks for integrating these things into your portfolio, they talk about exactly this evolution is having to take place. So we can't just stop at ESG with this stuff. Otherwise, we don't really get any change.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and for that comment. And you've got exactly what I was trying to get from what I was trying to convey from this presentation, is that ESG should not be a standalone concept. Sustainable investing should not be a standalone concept. We need to get to a point where the two merge, and we take absolute active steps in ensuring that we achieve, we do the ESG assessment and analysis of companies, but we also achieve impact when we go into these investments, and we just don't sit back and hope that it will come to pass at the end. So yeah, thank you for that comment. And
I think my biggest cautionary is to keep people from using, the asset owners from using the ESG scorecard as a way to evaluate whether the managers did a good job, because I can immediately improve my scorecard by not investing in mining companies, and putting all my money into tech stocks. And that is not what asset owners should be looking for. They want to see active participation by the asset managers. So what started off as a really easy sell, because these people like MSCI Bar could just send you the scorecard, is absolutely not where we should be going.
Yes, yes. There's more and more ESG ratings that are coming up, every year. And we should be using that as the at first base, but also ensuring that we know exactly, how the ratings are done, and also ensuring that, all the investments, have an impact on society at large, because we do have a lot of issues. And there's a lot of power and influence that investors can have over portfolio companies and fund managers. Is there any other questions, Wayne?
Not that I'm seeing at the moment, but thank you. And thank you for everybody who participated. And thank you, Zukiswa, for your insights and making this accessible and helping us start on the journey to better understand these things. And Mandla for also pointing out that, this isn't this is a topic that we should all be looking at and understanding better. Yes, and I see there one or other. There's one more. Gosh, I think it's an observation more. Should we not then be looking at it more holistically as part of the greater conversation around climate change and responsible business? And I think these are all things we picked up. That was from Viwetini. And we'll pick up on all these things. It gives us the building blocks for future engagements. And what I want to say is thank you. If you have any questions, you can write to me or you can write to reception@irfa.org.za, and we'll share it and we'll let you know when the next session is, and we'll keep it short like this and build on this. Thank you again for joining, and thank you, Zukiswa, and for your contribution.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.